Hey, it's Dr. Erica, Dr. Mom here, and I help overwhelmed, stressed out moms build innovative strategies, basic daily habits to improve upon so they can balance their hormones, reset their metabolism, just feel better, have better energy, get a better night's sleep in order to stay sane and healthy. And I talk about sleep a lot with my patients and in my programs. And it's one thing just to say sleep is important, get a better night's sleep, improve your sleep habits. But it's another thing to kind of know why. So I've created this video so that we can learn about hacking your circadian rhythm. And so we're going to talk about what the circadian rhythm is, the importance of it, and what you can do to support it. All right, so what is our circadian rhythm? So basically, think of it as your sleep and your wake cycle. So there's a specific pattern, a specific cycle that we should be following. So all of you who think you can stay up late, wake up late, catch up on your sleep on the weekend, you have another thing coming. You're mistaken if you think that this is something that you can do regularly and that you can continue to do without sending your body the wrong messages. So think about every cell in your body having little clocks within them, and those clocks know what time of day it is, and they're synced with the rise and fall of the sun. So the cells, every cell in your body basically knows what time of day it is. And this picture represents what's happening during certain times of the day within our bodies. So if you look at the bottom here, around the time, say when the sun comes up at 6 a.m., we're releasing cortisol. And cortisol basically should be high in the morning to help us wake up. So many of us know that cortisol is our main stress hormone. It's also the hormone that controls and helps with inflammation, right? It's an anti-inflammatory. So in the morning, our cortisol levels should be high. And this chart represents what should be going on in your body, what is innately within our biological processes that we've been having passed down from generation to generation. All right, so cortisol high in the morning. Then we also have insulin secretion, elevated testosterone, peak alertness around 10 a.m. And as you can see later on, early evening, we've got peaks in cardiovascular and skeletal muscle strength, lipid levels, body temperature, blood pressure. And then you see at around 9 p.m. that melatonin starts to get secreted. So melatonin is our sleepy time hormone that most of us think about, sleep and melatonin. And then throughout the night, we have other processes going on. And then in the morning, it starts all over again. So we have all of these clocks within every cell in our body, but the main circadian clock is called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, and it is found inside the brain. And it is completely influenced by light. So that light comes in and hits receptors inside the eyeballs, and it triggers the suprachiasmatic nucleus. And basically think of the suprachiasmatic nucleus as the pacemaker for all of the other biological clocks within the body. And it receives its cues from light in the environment. And that could be real light, sunlight, or superficial light. So that main SCN, that suprachiasmatic nucleus clock, takes its cues from the sun coming up in the morning. And then we have a bunch of other clocks all throughout our body. And all of these clocks have important functions. And think of these clocks like traffic lights in a city. Some of these lights are green, some of them are red, and they really have to work in a very balanced, synchronized fashion in order for these biological processes to be working properly, to be working correctly, to help you feel good. So what do you think would happen if some of these lights, street lights in our body, went green when they were supposed to be red? So that's what's going on when we're messing up our circadian rhythm. When we're on our phone at 11 a.m. or wide awake at 2 a.m. because we can't sleep, you know that your circadian rhythm is disrupted, and we really need to get it back on track. Researchers have really found the link and continue to do more research on the circadian rhythm. In fact, There's a professor at my daughter's school at Vanderbilt that is, specializing in a lot of research with this. It's really, really cool. So we really only started learning a lot more about circadian rhythm in the 1920s. It wasn't even until 1972 that we discovered the SCN. Then, only about 20 years ago, did we learn more about other clocks within different cells throughout the body. And then we started linking these clock genes and abnormal circadian rhythm to human diseases. And so, this is why it's so important for us to get our circadian rhythm back in line and in sync. When our sleep patterns are off, it can really be contributing to chronic illnesses and diseases. You see here in 2012, 2013, there's an immune component. And so, there's a lot of research still being done about the importance of circadian rhythm. So, common diseases linked to circadian disruption, they've discovered so many. So, ADHD, autism, seasonal affect disorder, which is found in people when in the winter months, or if you live somewhere where there's not as much sun. Seasonal affect disorder is real, and it affects your mood because you need that sunlight activation for that suprachiasmatic nucleus and the other clocks in your body. And you're not getting that in places where it's overcast, dreary, winter months. And you see the big link with a lot of cognitive disorders here: panic attacks, depression, bipolar syndrome, migraines, post traumatic stress disorder, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's. I often tell my patients that it's not just about willpower, and stop using your mind to calm down your mind. There's other things that are big players here, like sleep and your circadian rhythm. Other things like arthritis, allergies, cancers, metabolic syndrome, polycystic ovarian syndrome, and all of these hormonal issues linked to circadian disruption. Your circadian rhythm is a huge factor with the release of a lot of different hormones. So you could see testosterone, cortisol, adiponectin, insulin, which are hormones regulating blood sugar, blood pressure, growth hormone, melatonin for sleep, leptin and ghrelin are for hunger and cravings, thyroid stimulating hormone, prolactin. So big players here in terms of hormonal issues that are really affected by whether or not you get not just a good night's sleep, but optimal sleep at the right times. And the two main hormones that support your circadian rhythm are cortisol during the day and melatonin during the night. And you can see that they're inversely related here. So in the morning, like we talked about before, your cortisol level should be high and your melatonin level should be low. At night, your melatonin level should be high and your cortisol level should be low. So your cortisol levels should follow this pattern throughout the day. In the morning, it should be the highest peak. And throughout the day, it should drop down in a very slow roller coaster fashion so that when you go to sleep at night, it is at its lowest. Now, ideally, this is what this curve should look like. But because of chronic stress and other issues that can affect the release of cortisol, such as lack of sleep, blood sugar dips and blood sugar highs, excessive exercise, caffeine intake, things like that, those kinds of things are going to affect your cortisol release and your cortisol pattern as well. But ideally, we like to see this pattern of cortisol release throughout the day. So as I mentioned before, cortisol is your main stress hormone. It's released whether you have real or perceived stress. So stressors like emotional stressors, we're all under a lot of chronic stress nowadays, dietary stressors, sugary sweets, processed foods, chemical stressors, pesticides, medications, or hidden stressors like things you don't think about, pain and inflammation, things that can be caused from pathogens inside your gut, such as parasites, yeast overgrowth, disruptions in your microbiome, bacterias and viruses. Things like that can also affect the release of cortisol. But often cortisol gets a bad rap as a stress hormone, but cortisol has a lot of really great benefits. So it's going to aid in energy production and balancing your blood sugar. It's going to help with your blood pressure, your inflammation, and even your brain. So in the evening, then we get the release of melatonin. So melatonin is going to start getting released at about 8 or 9 o'clock at night, and it's going to peak throughout the evening and the early morning hours, and it's going to help you get to sleep and stay asleep. Melatonin's a really great hormone. It's super important as an antioxidant. It helps with cognition, cardiovascular, aids in hormonal balance, improves your mood, helps to lower stress, and it's even helpful with immunity. So, how do we end up messing up our circadian rhythm? Well, I've seen in today's society, the two main reasons are chronic stress and excessive intake of sugar. So, a lot of blood sugar dysregulation. So, this graph is basically what the release of your cortisol should look like throughout the day. So, I use a test called a 4-point salivary cortisol test. It's a functional lab test. You spit in a tube basically, and we take 4 samples of your saliva throughout the day to check for your cortisol levels. So, again, it should follow this curve. In the morning, it should be the highest, and as the day goes on, cortisol levels should go down. It should follow this pattern. It should follow within the shaded region. But what's happening in this first graph is that this person's cortisol levels are low. So all of these levels are below normal levels throughout the day. And that is being referred to here as burnout or low cortisol. Then we have a high cortisol levels or high chronic stress, and those cortisol levels are elevated consistently throughout the day. And you can also have an abnormal pattern as well. So maybe this level would be low, this level's high, this level's high, this level's low. So as you can see in this graph, this person has relatively normal cortisol levels in the morning. Hopefully she wakes up without feeling too tired in the morning, and then her cortisol levels start to go down, but then they don't continue to go down. And when it's time to go to sleep, her cortisol levels are above normal levels, which probably is going to mean that she cannot fall asleep at night. She might have to rely on, maybe a glass or 2 or 3 of wine to fall asleep at night, or she's just lying in bed wide awake and can't fall asleep. And I see this in earlier decades of life. It could be as early as high school, college, but as we get into our 20s and 30s, we definitely are under more high levels of chronic stress. And so this is not at all uncommon. It's common, but it's not normal, I should say, to have these high cortisol levels. And this person might feel really energetic throughout the day, a multitasker, a super mom, cooks and cleans and works and coaches soccer and, does it all, right? You have 1 baby, you have 2 babies, you have 3 babies, and we're just under this high levels of cortisol year after year. But again, cortisol is the stress hormone, and what's going to be the effect of excessive cortisol on the body over time? We're going to eventually have a decreased metabolism, right? After the kids, then, we get a 5-pound weight gain, a 5-pound weight loss, and another 5 pounds each year. And then it's harder to get off every year. Maybe some depression, some high blood pressure, some fatigue. We're not sleeping well, that's for sure. Maybe start having some digestive issues and some acid reflux. And then the doctor starts giving you some antacids. You're a little irritable. You might not be able to control your hunger and cravings. And you're starting to have some joint pain, especially in the morning, and everything's just getting a little creakier. And you're just saying, oh, well, I'm getting older, and you're chalking it up to being older. Well, that's not necessarily the reason why. Again, it might be common, but it's not normal. After a period of time when we're elevated with high cortisol, we end up bottoming out into a low cortisol state. And now you can see that all of these levels are below normal levels, still following the curve. So I like to refer to this person as hanging in there, but hanging by a thread. If this goes on long enough, then really chronic fatigue sets in. You go on a vacation. You need a vacation from your vacation because you're not even recovering well from your vacation. You might have heard of adrenal fatigue syndrome. Signs and symptoms might be unexplained hair loss. You might be getting frequent colds or flu, lightheadedness, palpitations, dry skin, maybe some alternating constipation and diarrhea. Again, some GI issues. You start to get a lot of weight gain, especially around the middle, maybe some upper back pain and neck, but not sure why. And then You can't remember why you walked into the room. You can't remember where you put your keys. But I hate to say it, adrenal fatigue is not real. It's basically your body doing what it's supposed to be doing because we're sending it these cues of chronic stress, our demands of everyday life. We got to take the kids, we got to pick up our kids from dance, soccer, or theater. We have to take care of our sick grandparent or maybe our ailing parent. We need to still work and balance our budget. And there's just so much that we are sending these continued stressful signals to our brain. So the real scenario of what's going on is a miscommunication between our brains and our adrenal glands. Our adrenal glands are not necessarily fatiguing. So in order to understand what I'm talking about, we have to talk about the communication pathway between the brain and the adrenal glands. So it's a pathway called the HPA axis, the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. When we have this perceived stress going on, our brain, the hypothalamus, tells the pituitary gland to tell the adrenal gland to release just stress hormone cortisol. So then we have all of this hormone released, and then it tells our cells what it's supposed to be doing, whether we're supposed to be releasing hormones to balance our blood sugar, blood pressure. But the problem is this is going on all day, every day. And so there's a continued feedback loop to the brain to release more hormone. I need more, I need more, I need more. And our brains were not created to have this chronic stress. This HPA axis was created when we were back in the Paleolithic time, cavemen and cavewomen. The only stress they had back then was running away from a bear or a tiger or a lion trying to stay alive. So that would last, only, a few seconds to a few minutes. And how often would that happen? It wouldn't happen very often. We would fear for our life. And then we would go back to our relaxing day of foraging for food or enjoying time with our family and relaxing or whatever. Those are not the types of situations that we have on a normal basis nowadays. In today's society, we are constantly running away from lions, and it is causing a dysfunction with our HPA axis. And when this HPA axis is activated, our body is putting resources towards staying alive, right? We need to run away from that lion. So we're going to increase our blood sugar to get more energy to our muscles. We're going to increase blood pressure to get the blood to our muscles so we can run away. And it downregulates systems that aren't necessary for survival. So it's going to shut down our gastrointestinal tract. It's going to shut down our reproductive system. And it's going to shut down our immune modulating systems. So you can see when those systems are being affected because we're under chronic stress, it can lead to illnesses such as irritable bowel syndrome, constipation, bloating, indigestion, or frequent infections, or you're just not recovering well from a sickness. Maybe you're not recovering well from a hard exercise or a workout, or you're having abnormal cycles, or maybe you're having problems with infertility. So again, our bodies were created to deal with short-term stress. And that's how this pathway was meant to be used and meant to be activated. Flash forward to today, where people are chronically stressed, and in addition to that, don't have the best ways to deal with managing our stress. Again, so that's how these diseases end up being linked to circadian disruption. So what can we do about it? We can't always get rid of the stress in our lives, right? We can't get rid of our kids. We can't get rid of our parents or our grandparents. We can't always just quit our job. Rather, we need to have tools in our toolbox to help us deal and mitigate with the stress that comes into our lives and how to really calm down that HPA axis. How can we send the right signals to our brain? How can we help manage that release of cortisol and that cortisol stress response in the curve? You need to find out what tools in your toolbox that you can use to help manage stress. Is it going to be deep breathing? Is it going to be meditation, going for a walk, laughing, watching a funny movie, going out with girlfriends, getting a good night's sleep, or managing your blood sugar? Find out what works for you and have a few different things in your toolbox so that you can access them when you need them, depending on situation you're in and how much time you have. I love an app called Insight Timer, where there are a bunch of different types of meditations. It's a free app, and you can do a 1 minute breathing technique. You can do a 5 minute meditation. You could do a 1 hour sleep meditation. So download that app, and maybe that will help get you started on starting a meditation practice. And then there is sugar. So, sugar is a big circadian rhythm disruptor. When our cortisol levels are low, when we're tired, what do we look for? We look for that quick pick me up. And sugar is a surefire way to get that little quick burst of energy or cortisol. Sugar lights up parts of your brain. It's addictive. And of course, it's going to make you feel better temporarily. But then the ill effects of sugar are there that come along with it as well. So inflammation, changes with your blood sugar, which is going to increase your levels of insulin, which is your fat storing hormone. Along with it, empty calories. So we want to find other ways to support your circadian rhythm for the long haul, things that are going to be effective long term, not a quick fix like sugar. A big player in circadian dysfunction is alcohol. So I know a lot of my patients might drink wine in order to help them fall asleep at night, only to find themselves waking up at 1 or 2 a.m. in the morning and not being able to fall back asleep. So the physiology that's kind of behind that is wine is a sugar, basically, right? It's made from grapes. That's going to increase your blood sugar, and then eventually your blood sugar is going to drop. In an ideal or a normal situation, your body would be able to balance that blood sugar no problem. But if we're under a large amount of chronic stress, that drop in blood sugar is actually going to cause a spike in cortisol. And if we get a spike of cortisol at 1 or 2 a.m. in the morning, that's actually going to wake us up. Because remember from those curves, that cortisol is supposed to peak at around 6 a.m. so that we're waking up refreshed and ready to start our day. Not having that spike in cortisol at 1 or 2 a.m. in the morning to startle us awake only to not be able to fall asleep or to fall back asleep at night. All right, so what can you do to get your circadian rhythm on track? So like we talked about that sun triggering the suprachiasmatic nucleus, that being the initial pacemaker for the day, get out early in the morning and stand outside for about 10 minutes. Make sure your eyes are open so it hits the back of your eyeballs to activate the SCN. If you don't have access to the sun, or maybe it's in the winter months, you can use a happy light. A good hack is to eat higher glycemic index foods at the beginning of your day, and supplements like vitamin D and adrenal support also help. Definitely avoid caffeine after 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, because if you remember looking back at your cortisol curve, that curve is supposed to be coming down, and caffeine is going to make that curve spike back up, and it's going to disrupt that cortisol curve. Avoid excess sugar, and of course, find ways to support stress management. At night, it's always important to have a bedtime routine. Just like you have a bedtime routine for your babies and your little kids, you need a bedtime routine as well. So proper sleep hygiene. What you want to do is start lowering and dimming the lights towards the evening. So as the sun goes down at night, don't turn all the lights on in your house, because it's going to trick your body into thinking like it's high noon. So keep the lights dim. Avoid or just eliminate electronic use and screen times about 2 hours prior to bed, right? Because those emit blue light, and that blue light is going to stop the production of melatonin. So you want to avoid the phone. If for some reason you can't avoid screens, you can use blue light blocking glasses. Eat lower glycemic foods in the afternoon and later if you really need to. I would always suggest trying lifestyle interventions first, but if you need, you can try supplements like melatonin, 5-HTP, magnesium, or calming botanicals like valerian or passion flower or magnolia. You want to sleep in a cooler temperature room, so make sure you lower the temperature in the house or the room that you're sleeping in, and definitely avoid alcohol. As some of you might look to alcohol to help you fall asleep, alcohol actually is a big sleep disruptor. Another great part of a bedtime routine could be keeping a gratitude journal, or maybe you are spiritual or religious and you might pray, or just a really great meditation can help with your bedtime routine. Avoid excess sugar, and of course, find different ways to help manage stress. So I hope that this has helped giving you more insight on the importance of proper sleep and how optimal sleep can really affect your circadian rhythm and how it can really affect your health. All right, if you have any questions, please reach out and I'll see you in the next video.